There a question over there?
Well, that's kind of some heavy shit. They're all, Zen stories have that kind of weight.
Yeah. So since this tape is sort of since this video is sort of starting in the middle, we are recording it. Since starting in the middle, I have to summarize the story that Wenda told so wonderfully. This is alluded to in the Mumen Kwan, and it's the story of in Tang Dynasty, China, where this beautiful woman and she has this girl and she has this cousin and they play together all the time and they, are in love. They grow up and they are in love with each other. And then her father betroths her to someone else, a very rich man, and so the boyfriend, who's also her cousin, quietly leaves in the middle of the night because his heart is broken. And then he hears this voice on the bank saying, "Beloved, beloved," and it's her. And so she gets in the boat and they go off. They have a wonderful life together. Then she wants to come back and see the father, see her parents. And so she does. And then he goes up to see the father and to apologize. And he says, "What are you talking about? Since you've left, my daughter has been lying in bed. She hasn't gotten up. She's wasting away. She misses you so much." And then, so he says, "But how can that be?" And he takes the father down to the boat, and the other version of the daughter gets out of her bed, and the two women merge. And then the Kungan is Chen and her soul are separate, which is the true Chen. So that's Wenda told it much better, but she took 10 minutes to tell it, so I can't do that. So these stories, they have a punch, don't they? That's the point. So the point of Kungans is to have us look at things that either we don't want to look at, or that we're not aware are there, or that when we look at them, we have such a conventional, sort of lazy mind to see them fresh. So that's these Kungan stories are like that. And in Wenda's talk, she talked about how a teacher at Providence Zen Center, when she was doing this long retreat there recently, said to her when she mentioned some kind of feeling that she had, who is feeling this? Who is angry? Who is sad? Who is grieving? Who is happy? And this is a very wonderful technique to use in our lives, because we get so caught up in our stories. We get so caught up in our sadness. We get so caught up in our happiness. We get caught up in our anxiety. We get caught up in all kinds of feelings and images of who we are. And we get stuck, the sixth ancestor, Huineng, woke up when he heard a line from the Diamond Sutra that said, "Do not attach to anything in your mind." But we attach so strongly. And if you ask who is doing this? Who is feeling this? Who is thinking this? Then you can pierce through what you're stuck on. That's sort of I don't know what the word is, the thing that dissolves the glue.
Solid.
The solid that dissolves the glue. Who is doing this? And not just when you're meditating, in your life, when you notice something's coming up and it's sort of taking control, who is doing this? This question, what am I? It's a wonderful solvent, So, thank you for your not exactly question. Are there any other questions or not exactly questions? Yes, Cameron.
So, who is doing this is important. Is why also important?
That's very interesting. No, because why invites you to make up a story. So, so when we, now sometimes why, there are contexts where why is important, to try to understand when why is close to how, then that's very important. So it can be why can be helpful, but it doesn't quite enter into Zen practice. Zen practice isn't everything, right? There are times when we need to see a psychotherapist. That's not Zen practice, but it's very helpful. There are times when we just maybe need to go chill out somewhere. That's not Zen practice either, but it's very helpful. So there are many things, there are times we need to just talk to somebody. That's definitely not Zen practice, because Zen practice we don't talk very much, but it's very helpful. So when I say it's not Zen practice, that means don't do it. But in Zen, we're always trying to pierce through those stories. We're trying to see how insubstantial they are. And so why is not helpful in the same way. When you're going in psychotherapy, why can be a very helpful question. But in the context of Zen practice, no. And the other thing about why is no matter what the context is, you have to be really careful not to use it as an excuse, because that's a real temptation. So thank you for your question. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Yes.
So, not attaching to feelings, but we have feelings.
Yes, we do.
So what do we do with them?
Let them be. So your feelings come up. Nothing wrong with them. What's wrong was when they attach and don't leave when they're supposed to. When they're
really happy.
Yeah, sometimes real happiness can be a real problem for other people. Sometimes it really gets in the way. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. When I was young and I was in college and I was supposed to meet my boyfriend, and this was decades before cell phones. And I was going to meet him. I was going to take the New Haven Railroad from Bronxville to wherever it went, I guess Penn Station or maybe Grand Central, and he was going to meet me there, but I'd read the schedule wrong. And so I get to the train station, there's no train. And I try calling him. And, he lives in a dorm. He doesn't have a phone, his own personal phone. So he lives in a dorm, so I call him, and I get his roommate. And I say, I have to reach Les, my train doesn't exist. I have to just talk to him. And he says, well, he's not here. And I was obviously really, really upset. And so this guy said, don't worry, the sun is shining. So sometimes happiness really gets in the way. That was not a helpful thing for him to say.
Did it get in his way? It didn't get in his way. How did it get in your way?
It got in my way because he was saying something which was absolutely unhelpful and one of the cruelest things he could have said. What he was saying was that my concern was not important, I was not important. He was sending all these messages. So his happiness, and maybe he was happy, but that happiness hurt me, so it's not helpful. So you have to, the whole thing about feelings and thoughts and things like that is they ebb and they flow and they ebb and they flow. And when they're appropriate, there's no problem, but then sometimes they're not appropriate. So everything is always changing. And things that are appropriate 1 minute are not appropriate the next minute. And we have to be sensitive. We have to see. We have to see what that is. You have to realize when you're someone who's really distressed is calling you on the phone, you don't say, don't worry, the sun is shining. That's doesn't work. So, yeah. So it's not that there's anything wrong with feelings. What's wrong is when they stick to us when it's really time for them to go. Like somebody who stays at a party too late and you really, really need to clean up when they do that. So you have to, it's not like you clamp them down and say, I'm never going to have any feelings again. That's not, it's A, not possible, and B, it's certainly not correct. And it's not helpful. But to have them be appropriate to the situation is what's important. And a big part of that is when we're interacting to not put ourselves in the center of things. When you're not putting yourself in the center of things, then your emotions and your thoughts don't take over so much because you're more attentive to what's around you. So that's really important. So that father in the story that Wanda told, oh boy, my daughter's going to marry this rich guy. It's going to be so cool, I'll probably get some money out of it, It's really great. And he's not attentive to his daughter's relationship with her cousin and how close they are. It's right there in front of him since they were little kids. He can't even see it. So yeah. So thank you for your question. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Could you say something about non-duality?
That came out of left field. Could I say something about non-duality? Why only dual?
Why only dual?
Yeah, the 10,000 things return to the one. Not the two things return to the one, So yeah, so we have this, so duality, like hot and cold, white and black, red and yellow. Now, the minute I say red and yellow, you say, what about blue? What about green? So that makes it clear that two is not really quite enough. But this world, we call it sometimes the world of opposites. And we live in this world of opposites, which actually, as I already said, it's not just, black and white. They're all the colors of the rainbow, right? But there's this notion of these separate qualities that sort of oppose each other. You're either red or you're yellow. You can't be both at once. If you're both at once, you're something different, which is called orange, right? So we divide the world into categories, and we chop it up that way, and things are separate, and in particular, people are separate. Like on the screen, here's me, I see Charlie, I see Liz, I see Shuang, I see a whole bunch of people, I see some people who's, aren't showing themselves, I see their names, and in the room we have a whole bunch of people. We're all sitting in different places, right? Like Liz is in Western Kansas. I'm in Eastern Kansas. We're obviously not in the same place. And then we have this idea that we're separate. That we're separate from each other. But we're actually not. There's this deep, deep, deep connection. So non-duality is seeing this deep, deep, deep connection. The thing about the butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and then there's a snowstorm in Alaska, that kind of thing. So, again, something I say a lot, but it works. Oops. Here are the fingers of this hand. They look very separate. Just like everyone in the room and everyone on the screen looks separate, but they're not separate. They're connected. So there's a very, very deep connection that we all have. Sometimes called codependent origination. Sometimes called oneness, has a lot of names. This deep, deep connection. So that's non-duality. And sometimes it's called the absolute. And then the world of categories is called the relative. But the absolute and the relative are not separate. Or maybe it's the relative and the absolute are not separate. So the absolute is this deep, deep, deep nature that we all have. This thing that connects us all. You can call it Buddha nature, you can call it whatever you want. The absolute is this sort of shining everywhere. The Buddha Vairocana, who has no fixed place. It's a line in the morning, the bell chant, Vairocana has no fixed place. It's flowing, And then The relative is the expression of the absolute. It's not separate. That's how the absolute functions. So, is that enough about non-binary? Okay. Non-binary means not two, right? So sometimes we say not one, not two. Okay? Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
So when it comes to not making anything, you know, if you don't make something, I mean, even absolute and relative is making something.
Yep.
But if you don't make anything, then, you know, I was in Nepal and in Japan both where I saw this, where you saw a monk, a Buddhist monk, and they were just still with their begging bowl and just standing emotionless the whole time. And the only time there would be any movement, I didn't sit around long enough to even see him blink, and I stood there for a while. I mean, you didn't even see him blink. I don't know how that, I mean, I'm sure they did, but and the only time they would move is if somebody put money in their bowl, then they would bow slightly, not even very much, and then they would come up. And it was odd how both of them did the same thing in two different places like that. But and to me, that's kind of like not making anything. I mean, I'm not doing anything. I'm emotionless. I'm just there. I'm not making anything. And so I guess I don't truly understand don't make anything.
So
Or maybe I'm making something too much out of it.
don't make anything means don't attach to a story. That's what it means. So the monks are simply there with their bowls. That's their function. You know, the Diamond Sutra begins when Buddha has come back from standing there with his bowls. They've finished their rounds. That's how the Diamond Sutra begins. And then he sits down, you know, does things with his robe and fluffs the straw or whatever he's sitting on and so on. If the monk is standing there saying, I am a monk, I am standing very still because I am superior to these lay people, because I am a monk and I can do this and they can't do this and they have to give me stuff because I'm so wonderful, I'm a monk and their job is to support monks, then he's making something, no matter how still he moves, no matter whether his eyes blink or don't blink, you know? But if he's just standing there, simply standing there, aware of everything that's going on around him, just simply standing there, and somebody puts something in his bowl, and his function is to go like this, then he's not making anything. And if the person putting, it's usually food, sometimes it's money. No, it can't be money because they're not supposed to handle money. Food. When they put food in the bowl, if the person putting food in the bowl thinks, oh, this food I made is so wonderful, they're going to be so happy with this food. They're going to say, who was that wonderful cook who made this food? This is just, you know, and I'm such a great person for giving this wonderful food that I worked so hard on and cost so much money. I'm giving it to these monks, and I'm going to go to the highest sheet of heaven, you know, when I die, because I'm such a good person. I've gained so much merit. You know, I'll be a monk and enlightened in my next lifetime. Then you're making something. But if you prepared food and you just part of your thing is every day when you prepare food, you put some of it aside and you give it to a monk who's begging, then you're not making anything. You prepared the food, but you're not attached to it. So that's what not making anything means. It means not being attached to a story, and especially not being attached to a story about yourself. Okay? So, thank you. I'd like to know how those guys do it. You know, when people stand completely still, that's physically really hard if you've ever tried it. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
So, codependent origination.
Yeah.
Does that mean that every phenomenon is not an individual phenomenon, but a joint phenomenon.
So codependent, so the question is, does this mean every individual is not an individual phenomenon, but a joint phenomenon? More than two. Sometimes it's called dependent co-origination. Okay, that gives you the idea. It's co-origination. So all of us create to the existence of everybody. And not just everybody, but, you know, the camera that's just connected over there in the corner on its stand, right? So everything is connected.
So in other words, you're complicit in my desires, and everybody in this room is complicit in...
We're all implicit in everything. I don't know what you desire, but we're all implicit in everything. Okay. Yeah. We're all implicit in everything. Which does not mean that we as individuals hold responsibility for everything that everybody does, because then you're making individuals again. It's just saying we exist together. We exist together, and everything everybody does has some kind of effect on this whole universe, not just our planet. You know, the Mahayana is really wonderful because they were into multiverses long before physics and long before that terrific movie, what is it, Everything, Everywhere, Something, Something at Once. Yeah, I mean, you know, you have all these beings from all these actually different universes pop up. You know, when the Buddha speaks in these sutras, and he speaks, and suddenly, you know, 500 other Shakyamuni Buddhas and 1,000 other, you know, Amida Buddhas, and, you know, 12,000 whatever other Buddhas, and all these Buddhas, everybody pops up, and they're all in their own little worlds, and these worlds pop up, and these pavilions, and these flowers rain down, and, you know, it's a wonderful vision. And it's a good metaphor for how things are. Yeah. But it's not cause and effect like in physics. It's not like, you know, I do this, and then all of a sudden molecules do something, and then it radiates out in space, and then somewhere, you know, 500 light years from now, which means at least 500 years from now, you know, something's going to happen on, you know, a drop of some kind of liquid will drop on another planet. It's not like that. It's just this deep, deep, deep connection. And when this deep connection is no longer an idea, but when you really perceive it, and you can perceive it, if you really look, if you're really open, it's there, you can see it. And when you really digest that, then it's very hard to be cruel to another person, or animal, or plant, or whatever. That's the heart of Buddhist ethics, is not a set of rules, but it's this realization of this deep interconnection, so that, you know, sometimes it's put, you know, if you hurt somebody else, you're hurting yourself. But then again, you have the other person and the self that are somehow separate. But this deep connection that makes it very difficult for you to want to harm someone else. I mean, even when you get really angry and you really want to kill somebody, but there's a little voice there that's saying, no, you really don't, you know. And not just because you'll be arrested and go to jail, you know, but no, you really don't. So, yeah. Buddhism is very interesting because, you know, ontology, how things are, you know, what things are, and epistemology, which is how do we know what and how things are, and ethics, which is how do we act, they're not separate. They just completely intertwine. They're not separate at all. It's very interesting. So, and we're over time, so thank you.